The U.S. recently hit Canada with tariffs, accusing us of fueling their fentanyl crisis. Ottawa has fired back, insisting that we barely are a factor, pointing to just 43 pounds of fentanyl seized at the U.S.-Canada border in 2024, a fraction of the 21,000 pounds coming from Mexico. Now, that's the mainstream media narrative, and at first glance, it makes Trump's accusations look ridiculous. But that 43-pound stat, well, it's kind of a joke. It only counts what gets caught at the longest and most undefended border in the world, not what actually makes it through. The real scale of Canada's role in this crisis is far more significant. 80 to 90% of fentanyl hitting our streets starts with precursor chemicals coming from China. From there, transnational crime syndicates like the Chinese triads and Mexican cartels turn it into fentanyl, where it's cut into deadly doses. After that, it pours into American cities or back into Canadian communities. And Ontario's trucking boom has played a major role in its distribution. Truck driving schools have increased by 350% over the last 5 years, and they are packed with international students operating with little to no oversight. Many of these students, who are linked to transnational crime groups, get licensed, move shipments across borders, and face almost no scrutiny. And this isn't speculation. It's a known smuggling loophole, so that 43-pound figure is nothing compared to what's actually being shipped. 2 months ago, Saskatchewan RCMP busted 17 pounds of fentanyl in a single truck. 4 months ago, BC police raided a super lab, uncovering 119 pounds of fentanyl ready for distribution. It's worth noting that a super lab has the capacity to produce thousands of pounds of fentanyl every year. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues catching major shipments linked to Canadian networks, including 211 pounds of cocaine in Montana, 1,146 pounds of cocaine in Illinois, and over 1,700 pounds of methamphetamines and cocaine moving through California. These aren't minor busts, and they prove that large-scale trafficking is happening inside our borders. And for those unfamiliar, this is no joke. Fentanyl is killing between 75 and 100,000 people every year in Canada and the United States. In fact, it's the leading cause of death for adults aged 18 to 45 in America. And in my opinion, this isn't just an overdose crisis. It's chemical warfare. China knows exactly what it's doing. Hell, we even negotiate with them to cut production, but they have continually refused. What's insane is that we don't even know how much fentanyl is leaving Canada. RCMP officer Matthew Bertrand admitted Canada is a significant fentanyl exporter, but he couldn't even guess how bad it is because our system is so full of holes. And a prime example of that is our border. The near 9,000-kilometer U.S.-Canada border has just 2,200 agents. That's one for every 4 kilometers. With only 121 official ports of entry, about 98% of the border has no fixed checkpoints, which is why it is historically known as the longest undefended border. In fact, a Congressional Research Service report pegged operational control at just 115 kilometers. 115 of 9,000 kilometers. No wonder this is a problem, Canada. Meanwhile, the 3,100-kilometer U.S.-Mexico border has 16,500 agents, or 1 per 0.2 kilometers, with fences, patrols, and tighter controls. This means it's 20 times more guarded than the Canadian border. So, is Trump wrong to slap tariffs on us? Maybe. But the real problem here isn't Trump. It's Canada's negligence. Under 10 years of Liberal rule, we've become a key hub for fentanyl production and trafficking. Our loose immigration policies let transnational gangs flourish, while Trudeau's soft-on-crime approach emboldened criminals across the nation. So the question isn't whether U.S. should be punishing Canada, it's whether Canada will wake up and fix this mess before it gets even worse. Today, I'm joined by Liam Deboer. He's a cultural commentator, writer, and reporter with Blendr News. Liam, thanks for being here.
Looking forward to chatting. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we hear a lot about fentanyl coming in from Mexico, but less about Canada's role. Can you break down how Canada actually fits into this crisis in about a minute and a half?
So production and distribution is a large aspect, definitely within Canada. Anybody trying to downplay that is definitely doing so for their own benefit, mainly our political class. However, the main function of Canada within this is financial. So we are a money laundering hub. We've become internationally famous for being an international money laundering hub. So the way that this works is businessmen from China will use the Chinese narcos to get their money out of China, and in return, the narcos end up getting their money back into China. It's a very sophisticated process, but the way it works is essentially the businessman gives cash to Chinese narcos in China, and then that businessman flies to a place like Vancouver, and that Chinese narco then hands him a duffel bag full of cash, which are often money made from drug profits. And then that businessman cleans that money through our casinos and it then ends up into our banking systems. This is where you see the TD Bank getting hit with these money laundering cases. So the main thing that Canada is involved in is money laundering. And then also we serve as a base for operations. If you look at the very large players in this game, for instance, Su Chi Lop.
I'm going to pause you right there, and we're going to finish the story when we get back. We'll be right back.